Well, hi everybody. I'm really excited to be here for a few personal reasons that I'll go into when we go through my talk. For the sake of having time for questions and to do a demo, I'm going to give my talk, which usually takes about 45 minutes to an hour. I'm going to press it down to 30 minutes by skipping every third word. It's an intelligent group here, so I'm sure you'll be able to fill in the gaps. What I'm going to do is give you an overview of some of the amazing things that are going on with VR, AI, and augmented reality technology. They're all converging to make a big difference, and they're coming out really fast. And so I'll give you some examples and an overview of what's going on. And then we can go into detail with some of my colleagues and some demos. When I worry about things, which I do sometimes, these are the top four in my mind that I think we all should have our eyes on. In particular, for me, the healthcare crisis and an aging population. I spent some time running a program at Stanford at the Center on Longevity, looking at changes in cognition with age. And I'm very concerned with an aging population both here and worldwide, and the economic impact of that, as well as the social impact. As you probably know, the US population has doubled since the 70s. And the proportion of people who are living to be in their 70s and 80s has really increased tremendously, with a lower proportion of caregivers to take care of them. In my opinion, the only way out of this bind is through technology. We have to leverage technology. With the demographics, we just do the math. We add time to people's existing age, and we won't have enough caregivers to take care of an aging population. We have to use technology to do that. Fortunately, there's a digital health revolution going on. Everybody in this room is already aware of that. Many changes involving sensors, leveraging the internet, focusing on the patient as opposed to the point of care being the clinic. Right now, almost every medical device has been moved from an analog format to a digital format. And this allows us to, and also we can collect data from people at large, out in the wild, as they behave and go through their lives. The quantified self-movement have been the early pioneers here. Combining this with some tremendously powerful back-end systems with deep analytics, where we can push interventions to patients, suck information out from devices, put it together and do some predictive analytics, allowing us to do personalized medicine. It's really amazing what the data analytics will allow us to do, and we're just getting started. So we see a future where AI and analytics will help us personalize medicine. But the question is, how do we change behavior based on that? And that's one of the things that I'll talk about and my colleagues will talk about. So again, as part of this digital health revolution, we have a revolution going on in medical applications of virtual reality technology, and concomitant with that is the revolution in AI technology and other enabling technologies such as virtual humans. It's my perspective, and I'm constantly harping on Chris about this, that the technology providers in consumer electronics need to be aware that gaming is not going to be enough. People will not be able to sustain, and the electronics companies will not be able to be successful if they don't migrate what they're doing with VR and AR and AI technology out into the enterprise. And one of the deepest verticals is going to be medicine. I think it's going to be the most significant vertical, actually, in the future. So here's the bottom line for my talk. Current concepts and technologies that we use in VR and AI have almost a 30-year history. Most people aren't aware of this. Many of the startups that are coming up right now don't realize that we've had VR technology for decades. And we've had research groups such as SCIPS studying what works, what doesn't work, what are the blind alleys, where are we successful. And we have heuristics, algorithms, clinical pathways that we know are effective. And finally, we have the technology to apply that. Recent changes make this technology accessible and affordable. And also, I think very importantly, the concept that we can use a virtual environment to change behavior, to act as a point of care, to reach the patient, that concept is a little bit more acceptable than it was 10 or 15 years ago. So VR and AR technology will affect all arms of healthcare, prevention and wellness, improved assessments, and this is very important, better interventions, pushing out to remote areas and having the point of care be where the patient is, and better management of chronic conditions. And I'll give some specific examples about this. Here's why I'm particularly excited to be here. I started working in the field of VR back in 1984 when I had more hair, and we all had more hair back then. And it's been an amazing thing for me to see the technology just burst out in the last few years. And it's very exciting to, Skip and I have been working together as colleagues for most of that span. So it's particularly wonderful for me to be here with my friend Skip, sharing the stage and talking to you. Back when we first started, the head-mounted displays were so heavy we sometimes had to counterbalance them with a brick, and we used silicon graphics Onyx machines that cost $500,000 and were the size of a small refrigerator, but it worked, and we were able to do some basic research and improve upon it, and we're here today with a background of protocols and understanding of what are the right pathways to go down. But we've had so many false starts. Back in 2008, I was invited to go over to help with the post-traumatic stress after the Sichuan earthquake in China. I optimistically thought we could use VR to help with the 50,000 people who were suffering from stress disorders as a result of that earthquake. The technology worked, but it was too expensive. We could not scale. We could not reach enough people using it. But now we can. With today's technology, we could respond to a major disaster and help intervene with a large population, just using existing cell phone technology. So as you know, now is the time for VR. Every major technology company has a plan and an intervention here. And I also suspect that most of the major medical device and pharmaceutical companies are looking very closely at this. But Samsung, Facebook, through Oculus, Microsoft, Google, HTC, Sony, the list goes on. All the major consumer electronic companies have made big bets on this technology, so it's not going to go away. And by the way, when I talk about VR technology, I have a very expansive definition. I also include AR and mixed reality technology. To me, it's just a spectrum of immersion. So I use VR as sort of my shorthand for immersive technologies. Sometimes we don't have to wear a head-mounted display. There's some wonderful room environments that we can step into and interact with a virtual environment. There's a tremendous number of startups that are developing some really great enabling software and sensor technology in the VR arena. There's literally thousands of them out there right now. And investments in the medical arena is happening too. MindMaze raised $100 million at a $1 billion valuation to do neuro VR, stroke rehabilitation as a starting point. Paratherapeutics is working with Skip's group on post-traumatic stress disorder. They've raised a significant amount of Series B funds. Limbix is funded by Sequoia, and they're doing some excellent work also for post-traumatic stress. And Reflection Health. So these are just a few examples of the venture-backed companies that will be successful in this arena. I've contacted and interacted with at least 72 emerging medical VR companies, and those are just the ones that I've been able to reach and get to know a bit in 18 different sectors of medicine. So it's really happening across the board. It's not just a few areas of medicine, but a very large smorgasbord of wonderful interventions being pioneered in these domains. Meanwhile, the predictions are, and these are probably very conservative projections, it's predicted that within 3 years, 30 million people will have VR systems and can use them. And that's an opportunity for us to both collect data and push interventions out to that population. A lot of this is going on in China. I recently got back from there, and the government has put a $10 billion plus poker chip on the table, investing in the technology. And there's also a large number of investment funds active in Asia focusing on this technology. We're also, of course, very active here in the US and in Europe, but China, I think, will be a very early adopter of this technology. But again, one of the key points I'd like you to take away is we're not just new out of the clamshell with this technology. We've been doing the fundamental work for more than 30 years, and there's a large collection of publications on PubMed that you can find where VR has been shown to be effective and useful. Most of these are pilot studies because it was too expensive to stand up a $500,000 machine to do the research with a large population. But now that the technology is affordable, we can refine what we learned from those smaller studies and push them out to larger validation studies. So now I think it's time that we'll be able to move forward with a big surge. Very quickly, I'm going to go over the overall medical applications of VR, AR technology. And again, one of the underpinnings of this technology is what we do with big data analytics and AI technology. Health and wellness. Preventive medicine is a big arena. Training of medical procedures, not just surgery, but everything we do at a clinic. Better assessments, more objective assessments. And then better interventions. So I won't have time to go into great detail, but I'll give you a feeling for it. In medical training, we train clinicians how to work with a patient, how to work with each other. We teach them how to use equipment and tools. We have team training that can be done in a virtual environment. I've seen a wonderful environment that was used by the city of Portland to coordinate an emergency response from the fire department, police department, emergency room clinicians, the mayor's office, how to handle an emergency. Then one of the things that we'll talk about in today's session is how VR can be used to help people understand empathy. Of course, we've had VR in medicine for many, many years. There's simulation centers. We haven't called it VR, but we've had, for example, arthroscopic simulators that people could go to a center and learn very precisely how to, in practice, how to use a new surgical tool and learn to do an operation. But those were location-based and expensive, and it's changing now. We have systems that can be done at the clinic. Here's an example of a system using the Vive, a clinician preparing and practicing how to place a tibial nail using a new medical device. So a way to get familiar before the operation and rehearse maybe the sequencing of procedures. There should be sound for this, if possible. Well, it's not that important, it's just some piano music. But you get the sense here that this is something now is taking what was done at very expensive, multi-million-dollar facilities that people would have to fly in and spend the weekend. Now they could do it at the clinic. And there's a number of companies pursuing this. Here's the work of our friend Parvati Dev. She's been doing this for many years, and she has systems that can do training of a clinical process. Just a quick example of, I think this is preparing a patient for dialysis. And this could be multi-user, where a team can practice how to prepare a patient. And we also have some wonderful virtual patients that have an overlay of physiological data, so you can see how what you're doing is affecting their heart rate, their respiration, how the anesthetics are affecting them. We also have some great data fusion systems where people can fuse data from MRI and ultrasound and plan an operation in advance. Again, I'm moving along very quickly. I wish I had more time to go into greater detail. I think the biggest impact of virtual reality in medicine, one of the biggest impacts is going to be on better assessments, especially for cognitive assessments. We can, of course, capture, using some of the emerging technology, movement and have a better way of assessing stroke rehabilitation, for example. But I think being able to capture behavior in a standardized search environment is going to be breakthrough technology. So we're developing new approaches for cognitive assessment. I'm not going to read this very long list. I'll just sort of mention a few highlights. There's, again, several groups doing some amazing work on stroke and traumatic brain injury recovery, using VR for both the acute and the post-discharge phase. We have great systems for ocular rehabilitation for strabismus and amblyopia, amazing systems to help with both acute and chronic pain, and systems to help people learn to manage their weight. Moving into more of the behavioral medicine arena, we've got systems for addictions, for schizophrenia and psychosis, for generalized anxiety disorder, depression, non-cognitive impairment, the list goes on. Phobias and anxiety disorders, conduct disorders, anger management, learning disabilities. It's a very, very long list. so we can do interventions and make a big difference in the field of behavioral medicine, which is an area which is really primed for disruption. We also have a number of systems that are very important for promoting health and wellness, to help the patient, motivate the patient to adhere to a lifestyle or a protocol that's going to improve their lifespan. And here's another important point. VR is a portable system, can be a portable system. So it doesn't have the high-end systems like the Vive right now are in clinics, but it's all migrating out to portable systems. So we can reach people in remote areas who otherwise might be very hard to reach. And you'll talk later, Skip, I think, about virtual humans and how they're going to be an important part of this, both as simulating patients, but also simulating a clinical encounter and team training. So just very quickly, we use VR for exposure therapy for post-traumatic stress, phobias, and anxiety disorders. In this case, Skip will give an example of how BraveMind has been used to look at combat PTSD. We also use VR for, here's an example of using a system for evaluating ADHD. I think I'll skip through the video of that. But it's based on actually some of Skip's research on using a virtual classroom as an ecologically correct way of studying a student and how they are able to focus and what are the traits affecting their ability to pay attention to a lesson. At the beginning when I talked about, I mentioned how I'm very worried about aging and the aging crisis. I think virtual environments are going to make a big difference for senior care all along the stack of care, helping with acute and chronic pain, depression and anxiety disorders, addressing isolation and loneliness, disability solutions, and then training staff of how to have empathy for someone who might be in a very much different age group. We've had great success using VR to teach situational confidence and refusal skills for people with addictions. And we've also used VR to help with stress inoculation. One example of this is a project that we're in the middle of doing with my group at Stanford called, and we've sort of borrowed this, inspired by Skip, it's called Project Braveheart. And we're working with kids who are scheduled for a cardiac surgery. And in their case, we know weeks in advance what the worst day of their life is going to be. So we do something about it. We send them home with a VR system that allows them to meet other kids who have gone through the procedure, understand the layout of the hospital, maybe learn some relaxation and diaphragmatic breathing skills. We sort of gamify it so they actually do it. But it's a way to prepare them and reduce their anticipatory anxiety for a very scary day, and also help them learn to navigate the hospital layout. So here's a very quick video about Project Braveheart.
Braveheart is an interactive VR experience developed to reduce stress levels in children who will be undergoing a surgical procedure. Patients and their families are guided through a 360-degree video tour of the hospital by a virtual companion. The gender-specific tour guide provides a friendly, approachable, and relaxing tour of the facility and introductions to doctors and key hospital staff. Along the hospital tour, patients visit the key rooms they'll encounter on the day of their procedure to help make the unknown more familiar. Children learn about parts of the procedure and can even practice mindfulness and relaxation exercises. The intuitive software design allows the user to navigate through scenes and applications, learning the hospital layout, all within Braveheart at their own pace, creating a first-of-its-kind, interactive and immersive video environment.
I use this as an example of
when Braveheart is finished,
a way we could develop an interactive product that makes a difference without a lot of great expense. In this case, we use 360 video, which is a lot easier to capture and stand up on a VR system than using a computer-generated environment, and it's already making a big difference with the patients. VR has been used for pain distraction, studied very effectively over the last 20 years, making a significant difference in reducing the use of narcotics in burn clinics, for example. And we've gone so far as trying to understand what parts of the brain are affected by this intervention. We know that the pain reduction is not just transitory. We know that immersive systems are more effective than non-immersive systems. And we know that active distractions are more powerful than passive distractions. So again, there is a history of research in this area. It's not just new and get going. We've also used VR for training clinicians how to handle difficult situations. I think I'll just show a few seconds of this video clip. In this case, we green screened a person in rather than using a computer avatar so we can get the micro expressions of the face. But this is an opportunity for a clinician practicing how to deliver bad news, something you want to get right.
Breast cancer. I don't know how I can handle this. It's just,
So much like a flight simulator, we can practice extreme situations, get familiar, and get ready to do it for the 1 in a million things that you need to be ready for. We can also help physicians see things from the patient's point of view. So very quickly, I'm going to go over the neuroscience of why VR is such an effective intervention. We know that VR is very engaging cognitively. It can activate the brain's reward systems. We can gamify things. And I don't know, if you guys have tried VR, they've probably made you walk a plank as a demo where you're up on a high building and it shows how engaging it is because many people won't walk that plank and the ones that do hesitate to jump off the plank. The principle here is in order to change a brain system, we have to activate a brain system. And VR is particularly good at evoking a cognitive state. And once we evoke a cognitive state, we can teach people the skills to change their cognitive state. We also can shorten the feedback loop. We can have people see the effects of choosing certain groceries in a grocery store. It immediately affects their avatar. And we can leverage the mirror neuron systems in sort of a sneaky brain hack, which we call your future self. Now, most of the research here has been done on undergraduates, and believe me, they don't like seeing their future self. Anything more than 5 years in the future is particularly disturbing to them. But we can use this as a way of seeing how the choices they make. And we did a study where we gave them some money, some actual money. And we gave them the choice of investing in retirement or spending on whatever you want. And the students who'd had a chance to bond with their future self, and we have some tricks to help them do that, saved money for retirement, an astonishing thing. We're currently using this to help caregivers have some empathy for elderly people. So again, there is a rationale behind why VR is so particularly engaging to help in behavioral medicine. We activate many aspects of the brain's reward systems, and the attention that we can get with VR by blocking out the rest of the world, the novelty and excitement that can be generated, and the fact that we can activate reward systems allows us to harness the brain's ability to change and to learn. So again, to summarize, I think VR is going to make a very big difference in medicine as we move forward. And again, when I say VR, I include AR and AI technology as an enabling part of that. I think the work of my colleagues here of coming up with virtual humans to allow us to do that is going to be particularly exciting. And I think it's a very exciting time. If you're interested, we're having a conference at Stanford. I think Chris and Skip, you're both going to be there in October, focusing on VR and behavior change.